if I have a defensive lineman lined up play side shade of me, and how do I know where that is? Is I tell our lineman that you have your hands here. This is your frame. If he is inside my frame to the play side, for instance, if I'm running stretch to the right, if he's inside my frame to the right, he is my play side shade. If he works into the gap and is outside my frame, he is not considered my play side shade. Head up is exactly as it sounds. If he is nose to nose with me, I consider him head up. If he moves backside or away from the play, that is my backside shade. Now, if he goes into the gap, then he is no longer backside shade. He's not covering me any longer. So I can either have a play side shade, a head up shade, or head up. I could possibly have a backside shade, and the only other option would be is if I'm uncovered. We don't count backers as covering us up. If we have a backer over top of us, we still consider ourselves uncovered. Our rules are very simple. These are our base rules. We do change a little bit and have some exceptions depending on the situation, and that's going to be a week-to-week basis. And sometimes we've got some exceptions to the rules that we have whenever we get different looks. The first rule is if I have a play side shade. If I get a play side shade, I'm going to lateral lead block that defensive lineman. The lateral lead block is a 4 to 6 inch by 4 to 6 inch step out and or over and up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first step towards that defensive lineman who's lined up play side shade of me. As I take my first step, first of all, stance. Everybody has different stance, and our philosophy is that I want our guys to be able to move in all directions. We have a little more athletic offensive line. We're not a big hulking offensive line. We've got smaller players, and so again, we're going to use our footwork to get us in good position. But I want us to be able to move in any direction the same, because we also run we run a no huddle offense, and we can change the play on the go. So they need to be able to do anything from their stance. So we do about a 50-50 weight displacement, front and back. We get in a good square stance, good base. And on that lateral lead, the first thing I want to do, my first step, is I'm going to go 4 to 6 inches up and out. So it's a lateral step to his outside shoulder or his outside foot's my aiming point. On my first step, I'm going to clap my hands to bring my hands inside. As I clap and step at the same time, that forces my hands inside to keep me from getting outside and getting my hands outside his frame and getting a holding call. And I want everything to work up in tight. So my first step, I'm going to clap and rock my hands. My second step is going to be a power step through his crotch. My aim point on my head is I'm going to try to work my nose across his play side shoulder or to his outside shoulder. Very similar to what we used to call a reach block, except I'm going to gain ground as I'm doing it rather than stepping flat. So my first step is up the field to his outside shoulder. Second step is through his crotch. Hands shooting on the second step. So I'm going to rock on the first one, clap and rock on the first one. Second step, boom, I'm powering through. I'm going to jam as hard as I can. I'm going to try to get my heels in the ground as quick as possible on the first two steps, and then start getting a lot of knee pump action, getting my heels solid in the ground where I can transfer that power. I don't want to bring my feet real high out of the ground. You'll see some guys stomping way up here. You want to get your feet just high enough to get your cleats out of the ground and then get them right back down again. So it should be very choppy steps, but it should be powerful steps. Now, on a lateral lead block, as I attack that outside shoulder in the stretch play or the outside zone play, I've got what we call we use what we call a 3-step rule. The 3-step rule is this. I want to try to get him hooked up. I want to try to get my head to the outside and get the edge on him right now and run that stretch play right off his tackle's hip or right off the hip. If I don't get him hooked up within 3 steps, so after I engage him, I've taken my first 2 to engage him. Once I've engaged him, I've got 3 steps to get him hooked up. If I don't, then I switch my leverage, and I'm going to go soft hand to the outside, good hard punch under his backside armpit, and I'm going to run him to the bleachers. And what that does is that stretches the hole, and as he starts to stretch that gap and move that gap over, I'm going to take him to the sideline to open up that cutback. Now, we want to our play side tackle is, when we see a 5 technique, it's very important that he tries to get hooked up and then runs to the sideline. As you work down the line, the more it becomes more and more important that your lateral lead step get hooked up quicker. And whenever I scheme on the board, I'll explain a little more about that on the board. The second rule that we have, so to review real quick, lateral lead if I've got a guy play side shade. If I've got a guy head up to backside shade, a defensive lineman head up on me to backside shade, I'm going to do what we call our step, stab, and stomp. In the zone, in the outside zone play, I understand that I'm going to get a pretty fast play by the linebackers over the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step play side, stab the backside or the play side shoulder of that lineman that's lined up either head up or backside of me. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to hold him on the line of scrimmage to allow the uncovered lineman behind me to work up underneath. So I'm going to step. If he's head up to me, I want to try to step laterally to get offset, get off center, go half man. If he's already half man on me, then I can just pop step to get my timing down. And my second step is a power step. I'm not going to lean into that punch. I'm just going to punch him if he needs it. So basically what I'm trying to do is I'm working in conjunction, and you'll see what I'm talking about when I draw it up. But it's more of a scoop scheme between the guard or between the lineman that's covered or backside shade and the lineman that's probably going to be uncovered behind me. So I'm going to step, stab, and then I'm going to skate or stomp out. But I've really got to play flat and understand that that backer is going to be trying to play over the top. So as I step, punch, I'm going to skate out, square shoulders to the. I'm going to keep my shoulders square to the line of scrimmage and play out to understand that that backer is probably going to be playing over the top. The last situation that we get, or the last step that we teach, is if we're uncovered. If I'm an uncovered lineman in outside zone, I'm going to do what we call a drop lateral. The drop lateral step is kind of our catch-all or our answer to any confusion that we may have. We'll go to this step if we're confused by a front or if the front's moving a lot and we just need to get base zone blocking, we'll go to this drop lateral. But if I'm uncovered, I want to close the idea is for me to close the gap between me and the hip of my play side partner here. So if say I'm a tackle and I'm going to drop lateral because I'm uncovered, I'm going to try to work as close as I can to the hip of this guard. My first step is going to be a drop step. I'm going to open my feet up almost at a 90. I've got 1 foot flat, 1 foot flat here. So I'm going to open up my hips. I'm keeping my shoulders square to the line of scrimmage. So as I'm here out of my stance, I'm going to open here, and I'm drop stepping. If you'll see, my drop heel is behind my post heel or my post foot here. My second step is going to be a crossover. So I'm going to drop and then cross over that first step and then square back up. My shoulders never turn. My shoulders remain square the whole time. But what I'm doing is basically I'm using my feet to move me from here to one gap over, keeping my shoulders square. So I'm closing that gap. The third step, staying square, and again, you're going to lock on. Now, in a drop lateral, what happens is if I work to the hip of the guy beside me and there is no defensive lineman that I can engage, I'm going to work up to the backer. And as you rep that and as you go through and see the different looks, you'll know when you have a better chance and you're going to get on your horse and get a good angle of that backer. And the drop lateral allows me to drop and get a good angle to get out in front of that backer as he tries to flow. It also closes the gap beside me if I have a penetrating defense. We've talked about the blocking rules as far as our zone blocking rules for outside zone or stretch. What I want to do is now go ahead to the board and show you how we put some of these rules into action. We've got a couple exceptions that I'll talk about. For instance, a backside 3 technique, we've got certain calls. But the first thing we do is the main understanding is when we're running stretch to the outside zone, the backside, and I'm going to show everything stretch right to keep it consistent, or outside zone to the right. We want to make sure that we understand that the backside end man on the line of scrimmage is left alone, and he is left alone because the quarterback is reading him. We run the zone option. And so as the tailback or the H-back crosses the quarterback's face, quarterback is reading this end. That makes him invisible. It's the most important rule in our offense is that backside end man is left alone, and we let his read block him. And that's very beneficial to the offensive line because it removes one player that you have to block. Now, looking at the rules that we've talked about, we talked about the first rule, which was lateral lead if a man is lined up play side shade. So as this tackle has a 5 technique, he's going to lateral lead. His aim points the outside number or the play side number. If he cannot get leverage and get his hip, get worked around, get his shoulders turned and hooked, as we call it, getting him hooked up. If we can't get him hooked up in 3 steps, then we're just going to turn and run him to the sideline. But we want to try to get him hooked up. Lateral lead, working up, get him hooked up for the 3-step rule. Guard here's got a 3 technique. He's going to lateral lead, try to get him hooked up again. As the H heads downhill, he reads his hat first, and then he looks back to this guy. So it's a little more important that he gets his hooked up, and it's a little easier because your tackle, your 3 technique, is going to be a little less of an outside player or pressing outside than your 5 technique generally he's trying to contain. But he's working that outside shoulder trying to get him turned. Now, the center is uncovered, so by rule he's going to drop lateral, work to the hip of the man beside him. It means drop here, work through the hip of the man beside him, and work his angle because we know that that backer is going to be on his horse right now. So he needs to try to keep his shoulders square and engage him at his level, making sure not to get caught up in the trash. If he gets over the top, anytime a player, if he plays over the top of you, I tell our offensive lineman to go ahead and lock on, get body on body, and take him where he wants to go. If he's running, we'll run him past the hole. And you'll see a lot of times those backers flow right where they need to be, and then you get a cutback underneath these linemen, and everybody gets washed across. So as our rule here, he's covered play side because we're going outside zone right. So he's going to lateral lead, work to the outside number, try to get him hooked up. Backside tackle is uncovered, so he's going to drop lateral, cross over, and try to work to that backer. And that's a tough block because this guy's going to be getting after it. This backer here is probably going to be getting on his horse when he gets that action. The thing we do have that's going to hold some of these backers is that our quarterback is reading him and booting around. So by booting backside and looking for the bubble option here, you'll get these backers sometimes get caught in a bind there. Now that's running it 2 or 3 technique side. I'm going to draw it up here, running it again, stretch right, outside zone right, but this time we're going to run it to the 1 technique. This is one of the situations where you're going to have an exception. Our exception is this. Normally, if he's covered, we have a backside guard has a 3 technique. If our backside guard has a 3 technique, he's going to call Kung Fu right now. And our Kung Fu call is just a code that the linemen have come up with that allows that tackle to know I'm going to cut him off right now. You don't need to punch him. Just get on your horse and get to the backer. So we're going to have these rules stay the same front side. He's going to lateral lead. He's got covered backside shade, so he's going to step, stab, and skate out. Step, stab, and skate out to the backer. This center is uncovered, so he sees the threat right there. These guys will probably call a scoop call. We've worked into where the kids understand, they understand they're responsible for these 2. And so he's going to drop lateral and work underneath and try to scoop under that tackle. These guys here make the Kung Fu call. And so the Kung Fu allows him to know that I'm going to drop lateral, work through his hip, and I need to get on that backer right now because of his alignment. His alignment, if we're running stretch to the right, his alignment has put him almost over the top of the center, so he's got to get there right now. What this tackle will do, and we work a cutoff block, he's going to try to throw his outside arm through the inside number of that 3 technique, and the way we refer to it is drop step and run a 40-yard dash through the inside shoulder. So he's going to drop step and run a 40-yard dash through his inside shoulder just to get him cut off. So that is the outside zone blocking scheme to a regular even front. What I want to do now is I want to draw up a couple exceptions or a couple situations where you have to adjust your scheme because of different looks that they give you. In the first year we would see some looks, or the first couple years we've ran this, we see some looks every once in a while that our rules don't always fit the scheme or they're not most beneficial. So we have to move. We have to kind of change what we're doing, and it's just situational. So what I want to do here is I'm going to show you if we do get what I call a 22 stack, which is 2 head-up techniques, 2 techniques head-up, and they stack the backers. So when you get stacked backers here, where that hurts us is if we do pop step and try to engage him, is that we get movement between the tackle and the backer. As long as this is a 5 technique, what we call is we've called it Baskin Robbins, scoop, ice cream. There's a bunch of whatever what you want to say, but basically it's a scoop scheme. And what we're going to do is we're telling these 2 linemen that they're responsible for these two defenders. These 2 linemen are responsible for these 2 defenders. And the way it works is he's going to take a larger than normal lateral step and punch this play side shoulder. He's going to drop lateral and work underneath when this guy works over the top. And you're kind of trading responsibilities. So we're going to scoop it play side. Now the situation is if we get him firing backside, that's why we're working through the near hip, because if that tackle fires backside, then the center's going to take him over. You might get the tackle